Media's quiet, but the audience is strong as Iran is working to undercut President Trump in the presidential election.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Logan Sekulow.
Welcome to Sekulow. We got a packed show today. I want to make sure if you are watching live right now on YouTube or Rumble or any of our video platforms, did you get involved and engaged as well? If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Get your comments in as well. We are talking about a topic that we brought up yesterday, and that was, Will, I'm going to give you a little brief background on the topic if people missed it. But then the fact that we saw our numbers grow. People want to hear about this story. But of course, if you flip on your major 24-hour cable news networks, they're simply just not talking about it.
That's right. So a report came out of the Wall Street Journal that said Iran is working to undercut Trump in presidential election, U.S. spy agencies say. They say that they've observed Tehran working to influence the presidential election, probably because Iranian leaders want to avoid increased tensions with the U.S., an official with the Office of Director of National Intelligence said during a press briefing. So we've been talking about this, and we saw people very interested in it. But one of the biggest problems with this story is that it's not everywhere. Yeah, at this point, you'd think with how much the Russia hoax was rammed on everyone that this would be something hitting wall-to-wall coverage.
This is a confirmed report from our own intelligence.
That's right. And so as we did more digging, as we went with the reporting from the Wall Street Journal, later in the day, we saw that CNN and Washington Post had very similar reporting, but once again, not wall-to-wall coverage like you'd expect on a story this big. But this is the document from the ODNI. That's an unclassified document, and it talks about the tactics of foreign interference in the election. Talks about foreign actors continue to rely on witting and unwitting Americans to seed, promote, and add credibility to narratives that serve the foreign actors' interests. These foreign actors seek to take advantage of these Americans to spread messaging through their channels and engagements. And there's other issues at play here, and we'll get into that in the next segment. But it talks about Iran continuing efforts to fuel distrust in U.S. political institutions and their propaganda mills and online personas, a vast web of them, to spread disinformation and have notably been active in exacerbating tensions over the Israel-Gaza conflict.
We saw our numbers spike because people said, what is this? What are they talking about? I haven't heard about this, which means, by the way, there's some smart people who work at these networks. They know what their audience wants to see. We do too. And guess what? We knew this was a topic that you would want to see. But for some reason, the mainstream media decided you don't need to see this. You don't need to be confronted with this truth. And that is why it's so important for us to be on YouTube, to be on Rumble, to be over 400,000 strong on YouTube, to be over 200,000 strong on Rumble, millions on Facebook, to make sure we are active on X, on all platforms, to make sure voices like ours, which, by the way, represent you more than most mainstream media ever will. We have to make sure we're there. So I encourage you right now, there's two options here. If you're brand new or you just haven't engaged in the way you feel like you could, I'm going to ask you to subscribe if you're watching on one of those video platforms. You're on YouTube or Rumble, be a part of this community. We do this show each and every day, Monday to Friday, from noon to 1 Eastern, but we post content continually all day long. Be a part of it. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that thumbs up or that like button if you are watching right now. And I'm going to ask you in the comments to always tell me where you're coming in from. So if you got no comment, you don't know what to say, I know sometimes it can be awkward. We want to make sure your voice is heard. We want to make sure we're also knowing where people are interacting from. So just put in, hey, Logan, I'm watching from wherever it is, Atlanta, Georgia. Let us know where you're watching. We appreciate that. As always, if you can support the work of the ACLJ, go to aclj.org, because not only just getting more eyeballs on this, we have to be able to produce this content. And we can't do that without you. So right now, keep us in the fight. Be a part of the conversation. Be a part of our media influence. Get the stories that matter to you on the front page, if you will, of people's social media platforms. We can't do that without you. So go to aclj.org. And again, if you're brand new or you haven't yet, just hit that subscribe button or that follow button. Be a part of this broadcast each and every day. We'll be right back.
U.S. intel agencies warning that Iran is trying to influence our election to keep Trump from winning.
The concerning revelation comes after a stormy few weeks in the United States politics, which saw an assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden exit the race.
Quote, the IC has observed Tehran working to influence the presidential election, probably because Iranian leaders want to avoid an outcome they perceive would increase the tensions with the U.S. Tehran relies on vast webs of online personas and propaganda mills to spread disinformation and have been notably active in exacerbating tensions over the Israel-Gaza conflict.
The Office of the Director of National Intelligence has warned Americans that whatever content they consume on social media could be foreign propaganda coming from fellow Americans.
Iran has played a role in our information space since the war in Gaza began, an increased role, where they have been seeking to put out lines in favor of Hamas and have even been reportedly, according to the Director of National Intelligence, funding some of the protests that were taking place in the United States and seeking to sow division in our country.
The intelligence report warns that Iran is trying to influence the election by undermining Donald Trump's candidacy. This stems from the former president ending the Iran nuclear deal with Tehran, reimposing sanctions and ordering the killing of the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani.
The Iranians aren't just interested in the public relations and propaganda and disinformation. They're also a terrorist state, and they are seeking to launch terrorist attacks worldwide, and certainly I wouldn't put it past them in the United States. Remember that it was during the Trump administration that we took out Iran's IRGC, Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps commander Qasem Soleimani in January of 2020, and there's no doubt that the Iranians would like to get revenge for that.
Welcome back to Sekulow. We're taking your comments. I see them coming in. I encourage you right now. We haven't done this in a while, a little bit. Well, obviously people putting in where they're watching from and all of that. And look, if the media, you may remember a few months ago, Governor Hochul of New York said any clowns that show up to these Trump rallies, of course, this was pre-assassination attempt, Trump rallies, they're just a bunch of clowns that are showing up in our state. Our state will never support this. And this situation happens, and all of a sudden you guys started putting up the clown emojis. It was very fun. We haven't done it in a while, but I'm going to encourage you right now. You know what? I think it's time, because you look at what this is, which is really just media distraction, telling you, or really not focusing on the truth that's happening right now. Again, these are confirmed reports. And you may have a problem with some of these confirmed reports. You may have a problem with the way Russia was set up last time. But as Will said, Russia was everywhere. And I encourage you, by the way, I encourage everyone to make sure that you're being careful on social media. When you're in a Facebook group, maybe look who the origin is, look what the admins are, see if they're real people, even know who you're commenting back and forth with. Sometimes it's bots, sometimes it's people in Iran, or people who are paid for by organizations that are paid for by those kind of governments.
That's right. And there's a couple other highlights I want to point to this Office of Director of National Intelligence briefing that was put out. And they were doing this as, we're now under 100 days from the election. So they were kind of their 100 days till election briefing on foreign influence. But one thing that's also in this report is they highlight three main foreign powers whose influencing could play into the election. And they are Russia, China, and Iran. We've been talking about the Iran one, mainly because it's so interesting to see the glaring hole in the coverage of Iran trying to harm a specific candidate. And that's what they're talking about. They're talking about Iran specifically trying to harm the candidacy of Donald Trump. But you also see a blurb on Russia, and they say that Russia remains the predominant threat to the U.S. elections. Moscow continues to use a broad stable of influence actors and tactics and is working to better hide its hand, enhance its reach, and create content that resonates more with U.S. audiences. Then wait, one more here.
I like that last sentence because it's like that is the most influencer content creator thing. We're just making content to trying to resonate more with our audience.
They're watching YouTube videos on how to get a little bit better, see
I've
what
said
you want.
that sentence, and I don't run a government, but I've said that when we're like, what topic are we going to do? Well, we want to make sure our content resonates more with our viewers. And that is part of content creation. It's part of this. But when essentially the BRICS nations are now creating that content and influencing, like I said, in different ways, because it still could be Russia, but we know these are all kind of one and the same.
Well, and it says these actors are seeking to back a presidential candidate, in addition to influencing congressional elections, undermine the public confidence in the electoral process, and exacerbate socio-political divisions. Here's the problem.
I use those words less.
Yeah, 100% true.
The content creation I'd use, but that part I don't say quite as much. But it is that moment where you have to be very clear-headed on what you're looking at and who you're influenced by.
Well, and here's the bigger problem, though, is that they're still going to push this Russia narrative. And don't be surprised if you start to see the left-leaning outlets start to pick up on this one more and try to push it again, especially if the polling starts to trend against them again. Oh, looks like Russia's up to their old tricks. Is there more collusion? And we hear that narrative again. But here's the problem with this. One, Putin publicly said that he prefers Biden to Trump because Biden was predictable.
Now that Biden's gone, scared of him. Yeah.
As Rick has said, Kamala Harris, much more predictable than Biden. But at the end of the day, you saw yesterday a sweetheart deal for Russia, a prisoner swap. We got Americans back, but they got aggressive criminals, hitmen. Rick talked about that as well, about the man that assassinated someone in Germany that was a operative from Russia. That is one of the people, just a mile away from the U.S. Embassy where Rick was stationed when this happened. That is one of the people that Russia got back. If the Russians truly wanted Donald Trump back in the White House, why would they not have waited on this deal? Why would they care to give a PR national security win to the Biden-Harris administration while Kamala Harris is trying to strengthen her international chops? That is why she had that meeting with Bibi Netanyahu. It is why she has been out there giving foreign policy speeches. And now they have another thing to put on their resume of look at what we accomplished less than 100 days from an election. If this were true, because I do question some of the intelligence from our intelligence agencies when they point to this and keep saying, here's the narrative, here's the line, we're doing it again, when at the end of the day, the Russians are making sweetheart deals with the Biden administration. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't pass the smell test. This is, once again, what they are going to put out there. And they say it is the most predominant threat to U.S. elections, but they're going to probably, especially in the media, hide the Iran threat, which makes a lot of sense. You understand. Yeah, they have an assassination bounty out on President Trump, on Secretary Mike Pompeo, because of the assassination of Soleimani. They made things a lot tougher for the Iranians to fund their proxy terror wars during that administration. Of course they don't want him back. Now that they're flush with cash because the Biden administration pulled back on sanctions, tried to get in that terrible nuclear deal again, they are able to run these operations. They can spend this money to have a vast web of online personas and propaganda mills to spread disinformation. That wouldn't have happened under the Trump administration because they were broke.
Yeah, exactly. They wouldn't happen. The hostage dealings wouldn't happen. These are nervous countries seeing what's happening right now and trying to figure out, play some of their old hits. Getting involved in these elections, getting involved in a way that honestly the American people need to keep their eyes very open. I think this is incredibly important. You may have a liberal friend in your life, as a lot of us do, and they start spewing some of these talking points, and then you realize, oh, they're all have the same talking point. Like I said, that we said the Olympics over the weekend. All of a sudden, it went from it wasn't the Last Supper. It was everyone knows you Christians. Everyone knows that.
Everyone's real versed on Dionysus.
On the Dionysus, on the Feast of Dionysus. Everyone knows this. Of course. How could you take that Smurf person and not think that this was something we all know? No, of course. Those become talking points. And where do those come from? I don't know about that one specifically, but there's a reason they all take fire and they get spread. And that is because they are not only gaslighting you, They are coming up with narratives that break the conservative Christian point of view and then have people start questioning it. And the problem is you see too many people who buy into it. It's not even just liberals. It's people who just want to buy into what they see on social media, and they can trust it because some random friend said that it was the Feast of Dionysus. Some random friend said this was Russia propaganda. Then all of a sudden, it starts spinning. It starts spinning. They get involved in moms groups on social media. They get involved in the mainstream media for some reason has decided, I think we can jump to some conclusions, and I never said this. If you think you know the conclusion, send in the clowns. We don't have any clown emojis going right now. I forgot to say it. Send in those clowns as we head to this second part of the show because this is an important time. These kind of broadcasts each and every day. The reason we do this show, we are not ad supported. We are supported only by people like you who know your voice needs to get out there, and we're not doing it behind a paywall. Okay, there's a lot of great conservative outlets out there, a lot of great outlets that are spreading a lot of interesting information. I think they have some very intelligent hosts, but a lot of them are doing it behind a paywall. You got to spend whatever for your subscription, and then you're back behind there. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it can become an echo chamber. What we're proud of is we're 400,000 plus strong on YouTube. We're 200,000 plus strong on Rumble. We're influencing culture. You want to know how your kids are getting their news? My son was talking to me yesterday about the BRICS nations, okay? He's 11. Why does he know about this? It's not from his school, great school, but it's not from the school. It is from YouTube. So we have to make sure we are there and that we can reach an audience. So I encourage you, it always does really well for us. Not only do you want to support the work of the ACLJ by making your donation, and donations are doubled right now during our Life and Liberty Drive for August. And we got some great stuff coming up next week. Yeah, we're giving you a little bit of a breather for that because I know we hit you hard for the last few days, but it's still open. You can still be a part of the Life and Liberty Drive right now at aclj.org. And you can still help if you didn't see the broadcast. We talked about that woman in Egypt who is a Christian who has been essentially kidnapped and forced to convert to Islam. And now we are doing our best to work with the UN and to present the UN our plan to help rescue her. We're doing all that over at aclj.org. But you can be a part of that conversation too. And there's simple ways to do it. Obviously, you can make a donation. That's greatly appreciated. But if you're brand new, or maybe you haven't done it yet, subscribe. If you've already subscribed, like. If you've already liked this video and subscribed, comment right now. Put in a comment if you're watching on one of the outlets that provides that, a Rumble or a YouTube. And that comment can be telling me where you're coming from. You could send in a clown emoji, as a lot of you love to do, which I always think is very fun. Or you can just simply make your comments heard. Someone on our team, by the way, is reading. If it's not me, which I try to scroll through as many as I can, if it's not me, though, we have members of our team monitoring the comments because we make a broadcast like they said. We are creating content to, what was it?
Yeah, 100%. You are, use the networks of U.S. Western personalities to create and disseminate a friendly narrative.
It was like content that creates influence. Your content is more appropriate
its
for our
reach
audience.
And create content that resonates more with U.S. audiences.
That's what we're trying to do each and every day. So subscribe, send in those clowns. We'll be right back.
This morning, Iran staging a mass funeral for Hamas's political chief. The Iranian regime says Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated by Israel, killed by a missile strike on this building in the heart of its capital city, just hours after meeting Iran's supreme leader.
Leading the prayers, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who has promised a harsh punishment for the murder of a guest in his country.
Calls of mourning mixing with cries for revenge against Israel and death to America.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel is prepared for any retaliation.
There are challenging days ahead of us. Since the attack in Beirut, threats have been heard from all sides. We are prepared for any scenario and will stand united and determined against any threat. Israel will exact a heavy price from any aggression against us on any front.
A potential repeat of this massive missile barrage Iran fired back in April.
If Israel is attacked, we certainly will help defend Israel. You saw us do that in April. You can expect to see us do that again.
Israel is bracing for retaliation on multiple fronts tonight, and now the State Department issuing a stark new warning to U.S. citizens: get out of South Lebanon because new fighting may be about to erupt.
The UN Security Council held an emergency meeting today to discuss the strikes overnight. This gathering came at Iran's request.
Iran is likely to respond, but I think it's going to be probably a lot more muted than it was in April when it responded to those large number of killings of IRGC generals and senior leadership in Syria earlier this year. Again, Iran operates its influence through its IRGC through the region, and you sever that, they lose a lot of power and influence, and that's actually what's at stake with these leaders being taken off the board.
Welcome back to Sekulow. You're joined by Rick Ronell. I couldn't think of someone more important to have on this broadcast as we are monitoring, and President Biden just spoke about this, I guess you'd say, historic hostage swap between Russia and the United States during a very uncertain time with our relationship with Russia. And of course, this has some pretty big ramifications. And of course, the conversation has come to, Rick, well, what was the swap? Obviously, we're happy the Americans were freed. We always want to see that, and specifically these two who have been imprisoned for quite some time. But who are we swapping it for? What does the deal end up being? And I just saw a tweet from you that really, or ex post that really expands upon this. And it's a pretty rough situation.
Yeah, look, I think we've got to understand that we've got different issues going on here. The families of individuals who are held against their will, who are hostages or prisoners, they have a keen focus on getting their loved ones back. They shouldn't coordinate with the government. They shouldn't think about the precedent or the slippery slope that it sets. They need to be focused on getting their loved ones back. We get that. We understand that they have a very sincere desire to get their loved ones back. But public policy officials have to think about something else. They have to think about the slippery slope and the precedent that is set by raising the price on Americans just simply for hostile governments to get terrorists back home. And so that's where my concern here is. I have helped individuals, families from outside the government negotiate to get their loved ones home. And that's one hat that you wear, and you don't think about the precedent. You just literally try to get them home. But when I've been a government official, and it's my responsibility to make sure that we don't have a slippery slope, you can't do these exchanges. They're not a good idea. There's an individual that I just highlighted on X that when I was U.S. ambassador to Germany, this terrorist, this Russian terrorist, drove his bike in the Tiergarten, which is a park in Berlin right next to the U.S. embassy, in the middle of daylight, shot a Chechen and kept going through the bike in the bushes, and eventually was caught by the Germans. It took a while. We had to really push the Germans to show them that this was a Russian plot. They arrested the guy. They put him in prison. And the White House has been leaning on the Germans the last several weeks to release this individual, this terrorist, this guy who murdered somebody in the middle of Berlin in broad daylight. The Germans have now released him. He's gone back to Putin and back home to Russia. He's one of the people and the top person that was just exchanged for very innocent Americans, a couple of journalists and some others. Now, again, the families, of course, are ecstatic, but I'm very concerned about the precedent that this sends. Americans overseas now, the price just went up on their head.
Pressure that the Biden campaign and well, not campaign anymore, but the Biden administration has said that they have put on the Russians for the war in Ukraine. And then you look at a deal like this where they get to celebrate that we brought Americans home right at the beginning of a Harris campaign to help build that resume for her as she seeks to be the next president. But also it looks like a sweetheart deal for the Russians, for Putin. How are they going to square this, that they are the toughest on Putin and that he's not going to be able to get away with everything he gets away with when they're letting terrorist hitmen be exchanged and giving a gift to Putin at a time where they're trying to say they're strong on him, but also Putin favors Trump. So, Russia, but we're going to also have a great foreign policy win right here. Why would Russia, if they wanted Trump to win? Why would they even agree to this?
Well, let's remember that Putin wanted Joe Biden because he was predictable. And someone who's more predictable is Kamala Harris. And so this gift from Vladimir Putin to the Biden-Harris administration and the Harris campaign is very clear. It is a clear indication that Vladimir Putin wants Kamala Harris because she's weaker and she's an easier opponent. So they're giving this gift in the middle of the campaign because it looks like the weak candidates, Biden and Kamala, are going to just celebrate this and not think about the slippery slope. Putin is laughing all the way. He got the Germans and the Americans to do exactly what he wanted. And do you not think that Vladimir Putin is going to be looking for new Americans to put into the reserve so that he can get others? Of course he is. This is why we are less safe. And I've heard from journalists for the last 8 years that somehow Vladimir Putin was interfering in our elections and they were distraught about it. Well, look what just happened today. Vladimir Putin is interfering in our elections and literally celebrating this gift that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris signed off on and just gave him. And I think it's really a signal of weakness, and that's not what we need from America.
The president tweeted, "I will not stop working until every American wrongfully detained or held hostage around the world is reunited with their family." When you couple that with the soundbite that we just heard, talking about questioning whether allies matter, they do matter. How do you think the Israelis feel right now when he's making speeches about you have to treat your allies right and they really matter, and also that we won't stop working until hostages are home, when we know that there are American hostages being held by Hamas right now?
Well, I don't want to see any hostage swaps. I don't want to see any hostages taken. And this is the world that we're living in, which is why you need leaders like Donald Trump who actually go in and utilize the other parts of the U.S. government, the other tools, sanctions, serious sanctions, isolation, tariffs. All of those issues are how Donald Trump would get individuals returned home without doing the ridiculous swap. So you take Pastor Brunson, for instance, who was held against his will in Turkey. Donald Trump said to President Erdogan, "I'm going to ruin your economy tomorrow if you don't release Pastor Brunson." They released Pastor Brunson because they believed that Donald Trump was going to do something to their economy. And so that's the type of negotiations that we need. Somebody who doesn't just look into the prisons and say, who can we swap? It's such a terrible, easy way to do a prisoner swap, but it makes us less safe.
Certainly, the moments I miss of President Trump were moments where I think he's even been quoted saying, "It's like, don't be crazy, but give them the potential to think you may be, that you may do something that could destroy their country to save one person, to save one American." And we saw that happen firsthand. Rick did, and the ACLJ team did as well with Pastor Brunson. And of course, they did ask Joe Biden, did he speak to Vladimir Putin? To which he replied, "I don't need to speak with Putin." So there you go. Done. I don't need to. It's fine. At this point, I'm a lame duck president. What does it matter? Give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. 1-800-684-3110 as we head into this next segment. Like I said, we're also in this process right now as we are urging the UN to help save and rescue Irene, a Christian woman who was in the middle of her medical school, exams, was captured. And we're a part of it right now to try to get her back. Again, this is in Egypt that's happening right now. And all of this is happening around the world. And I brought it up earlier that this is not some sort of right-wing propaganda. Look what happened in Rick's neck of the woods in San Diego just this past weekend. We're going to discuss that coming up. Give us a call, 1-800-6